Kia ora everybody, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this Chit Chat where we focus on school leadership occurring across Aotearoa with three of our champion structured literacy leaders. It is my privilege to introduce you to Abby Bates, who is beaming in from St Patrick's School in Invercargill. Kia ora, Abby.
Hi Carla, nice to see you.
And it's also great to welcome Chris. Chris is beaming in from Waterloo School in Wellington. Are you needing to tie everything down there in this crazy weather, Chris?
I think we managed it earlier on the day. It's been pretty wild, that's for sure. Kia ora.
Cool. And huge kia ora to Deb, who is beaming in from Manurewa West Primary School in Auckland. And I understand you've had some power outages at your end of the country today, Deb.
Koto, yes, autumn has definitely arrived and the rain with it. And so instead of beaming in from home, I'm back in at school for this afternoon where I can trust power versus in the countryside. So, yes.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for giving up a little bit of your time to speak to me this afternoon. And obviously the purpose of our Chit Chat is to just share some of your experience and some of the exciting things that you've got in place for leading forward as you implement structured literacy. Perhaps if we could just move from the south to the north, and if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves and explaining a little bit about your role in terms of leading forward implementation of structured literacy in your kura. We'll start with you, Abby.
I'm Abby Bates and I work at St Patrick's School. I'm the lit leader here at school with also Kelly Townsend. So we're in our second year of implementing structured literacy. It's been a great journey, learning lots myself and enjoying inspiring and coaching staff through this journey as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Chris.
Yes, Chris Cowman, literacy leader at Waterloo School. We're coming to the end of our second year with Learning Matters on the structured literacy journey. And I think my role, well, along with the PLD team that we have here, is just really supporting staff to build their knowledge and their practice. And it's been going pretty well so far. And we're just having some consultants at the moment. So, yeah. There's always the next things to work on.
Can't wait to hear more about it. And Deb.
Deborah Gosnell. I'm in our, what are we now, fourth year of our journey. I switched from being PLD facilitator for all and for PACT implementation, and then within 2 years we started our journey with Learning Matters and making changes across the school. And like Chris said, we also have lead teachers within each whānau. So yeah, for us it's exactly the same thing around empowering that change and making it happen.
Brilliant. Awesome. So I've got a few questions that I wanted to lead into our chat with this afternoon, but one of the things that I often find myself saying over and over when I'm in different settings is that our purpose as leaders is to work towards building a consistent evidence-based educational pathway so that our students in various classrooms experience much the same recipe of instruction as they move from class to class, as opposed to all of the ingredients and the recipe and how we do it being, you know, all somewhat different. So I wondered if we might kick off our chat this afternoon with you each sharing a couple of specific actions that you've taken to strategically lead forward to achieve a consistent approach in terms of evidence-based practice and structured literacy. So perhaps, Chris, if we come to you first and you could just share a couple of key things that you've done with that ultimate purpose of gaining or developing a consistent approach in mind.
I think the main thing I think that's really helped was the creating a PLD team. So across the school, having staff from within each syndicate as part of that team, and we meet regularly to kind of touch base and support each other, so we can then support all of our staff. I think it's been really important also to get really good buy-in from our school board and our principal. And we've had some fantastic support from our board and principal around resourcing, so helping us to purchase the resources to give to our staff so they can do it. But also release time, because it's a lot of knowledge building, and our board really thought that was something we need to focus on. So giving some extra release time for our teachers to kind of immerse themselves in the knowledge building and in the PLD modules. And I think in terms of consistency, we've done it throughout the school. So that's right from our principal and our SLT down through to our support staff, our CRT staff, involved in our PLD days, watching the modelling sessions where we can, and by all of us being part of that, we're all on that same journey together, and so we can support us. So it's not just the PLD team, but we can all kind of help each other. And I think we've done our program of regular observations, video reflection, having a part of our professional growth cycle and coaching has been quite beneficial as well. So I think they're probably our key ones.
Yeah, brilliant. So my key takeaways from that really are about kind of immersing it right the way through, right? So taking everybody with you,
Yes.
but still having that team and also engaging stakeholders such as your board of trustees as well.
It's been really, yes, absolutely. And I think also like our staff have been really open to it as well, and go through those days with Learning Matters and gone on the journey with us, and some staff might need a bit more support around things, but we've tried to be flexible and adaptable to that to kind of help everyone head in the same direction together.
Brilliant. Abby, what about you? What are a couple of specific actions that you and your team have taken to develop a consistent evidence-based educational pathway in structured literacy?
I've been really lucky to have an amazing ideal consultant, Ruth. So she works really closely with Kelly and I and the leadership team here at St. Patrick's School. We sit down termly and create our roadmaps. We have clear direction where we're going, and we really do schedule in, observations when we're modelling to staff. We do observations, we do video, that they do their own reflecting videos, and buddy observations is another tool that we use just for them to reflect on their own practice, because we really want that gold standard in those tier 1 classrooms. As a school, so having that direction, that clear direction of where we're going is great. As a school, the leadership team has been fantastic with the one focus area for the 2 years. So we're really focusing on structured literacy and getting it up and running at St. Patrick's School, because as you know, it's very busy at schools, isn't it? And just definitely having that teacher only day at the start of the year and focusing on the why. Really focusing on the science of reading, looking at our data and having the why behind what we're doing.
Brilliant. Coming back to your roadmap, Abby, can you just talk a little bit more about that? Because I'm not sure that that's something that you would have previously implemented. Am I right?
Yes, since I'm a literacy leader and I'm not actually in the leadership team as such, it is fantastic just to have a clear overview of what's happening. So it comes down to when we're doing our staff meetings, when Ruth is on site, what Kelly and I are doing around coaching staff, also building knowledge as well. What sort of focus area are we getting our staff to look at? So is it explicit instruction?
So you're very deliberate in identifying the actions that you're going to take and identifying which personnel in school are involved in different actions. Do you also include if there's particular assessment practices coming up throughout the course of a term? Are they included in your roadmap as well?
Definitely, they are included, and then we also send that information out to our staff so they know what's coming as well. And we're actually we've sat down today, which was really exciting, with Ruth and developed our curriculum implementation plan and assessment overview, and that is such a great resource for us. So detailed, and we know exactly where we're heading. what the whole school is doing, and we've got consistency, which is fantastic.
It is exciting, isn't it? Because once you get to the stage where you're kind of pulling all of that together, it feels a little bit like the icing on the cake. And I think that's a key part in building sustainability or maintaining what you've worked so hard to develop to this point. So yeah, well done. That's really exciting. What about you, Deb? What are some key actions that you take in terms of building that consistency?
It's great to reflect actually on our journey as a whole. We go back our 4 years when we kicked off thinking it would all go smoothly. This would happen, then that would happen, and then COVID happened. So we actually took that year to prepare for the change. We had to do a lot of stock taking and actually be quite honest in the mirror about where practice actually was. And that was not in a judgmental sense, but actually just what is actually happening in every nook and cranny, as well as what are our beliefs? What are we coming with and why from those sorts of things? And then we did fun things just to open mindset. So I'm quite lucky. We have a really strong history here around change in our maths curriculum, which has won awards. So I get to piggyback off a lot of growth mindset thinking in relationship to change. So that was really cool. And then we picked off things that we were good at or that we had history of. So we were a letters and sound school. So we talked about sound articulation across the school, and that became our starting point. And from there, we built our curriculum team. We built in Padlets so that you could revisit learning instead of just having that one hit, and also then straight into classroom. So lots of in-class presence. That was really pivotal to get. For us, it was about getting momentum and getting buy-in from the start. There's always your early adopters, but there's also, change is scary.
Yeah.
So a lot of it for us was, this is the why the science of reading, why is this way important to us, without beating ourselves up that we didn't know. But we had to model that change and be quite vulnerable as leaders. And like both Abby and Chris have shared, we're really lucky here. We have a solid SLT team that are all on the same page, and that was critical. And our board was incredibly supportive with resourcing. So we used that year really to pitch ahead. We actually worked with LM at that point, and we had, it was Sarah, wasn't it, who came in and did an amazing presentation to our SLT to paint the board sense of what it could look like, which then also meant we could ask for help early around, if we were to purchase early, what things should we have ready before we go into implementation? And that, as a starting point, was hugely valuable.
That's brilliant. And I think listening to all three of you, there are some really key trends that are coming out to kind of summarize. But I think the biggest one is that you've either planned leading into the change, or you're planning as you work through the change, or actually both. And I think that's it's something that really can't be understated or not considered as we move forward with real quality implementation of structured literacy. And would you agree that, those schools that are potentially just starting out, or those schools that might be currently self-implementing, if this isn't something that they have previously thought about, being strategic around, like you were saying, Deb, getting some insight into what I call the state of the nation, what currently exists in our school, what practices are there already, what do our belief systems look like, sort of as leaders, we need to look around the corner before we get to the corner, right?
Absolutely.
And then thinking about, picking up on what you were saying, Chris, about, who will lead this within the school, because it's all very well and good having a consultant drop in and drop out, but actually, in our experience, what works well is as a consultant, we are helping to build capability and capacity and leadership function within the school to make us obsolete, if I'm really honest.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then Abby, you sort of talked a lot about the importance of leading through the change when you're in the change with that roadmap structure, where we plan term by term of all of those things that need to take place. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. Well done, team. So when we think about teacher knowledge, this is huge, right? Because for many of us didn't go through training where we learnt about the science of reading to the extent that we can, have access to us. There is a mountain. In fact, even myself, I'd say sometimes it's quite overwhelming how much information is out there for us to kind of need to get across. What would you say in terms of supporting teachers to build their knowledge? What would you say are some really key things for other school leaders to consider? Anybody can jump in to answer this.
I think just being adaptable and flexible. So I think we different staff learning at different pace, and so responding to that when you're having questions and queries. So adjusting our timeframes a little bit for different staff depending on their journey and where they're at. That's probably the main thing. And I think it's as fast as you can, as slow as you must as well, which was drilled into me. And I think the other thing is that we realized, like, we just did a bit of a temperature check around the staff, and we were going to push ahead with writing and what they look like, but actually we need to slow down and make sure we get this embedded really well. So just being adaptable and flexible, I think, was a key thing.
Can I ask, Chris, because what you've just described is common on two fronts. One, people want to get to spelling and reading and writing as fast as they possibly can, but there's a real danger in that, isn't there?
Yeah,
can you just talk a little bit about, from your perspective, what was important when you were making that decision to actually kind of back up a little bit and go, hey, I'm not quite sure if we're ready for that. What was important in that?
I think it was just the well-being of the teachers. Like, it's a lot, like you said, a lot of learning and new learning, and a lot of knowledge to gain. And I think even though we had some additional PLD and release days, but we could sense that actually they've got so much other things going on, and this is quite a big shift. And so we just wanted to make sure that we're doing it really well. We'll do it as well as we can. And so that's why we made that decision, just to kind of slow it down a little bit and adjust those timeframes, because we thought that would give us the best outcome in terms of embedding it on long term.
Yeah, 100%. Abby, Deb, did you have anything to add around building teacher knowledge and sort of what you've done in terms of strategically, I'm going to say, build teacher knowledge?
The plan is the massive part. Oh, sorry, Abby. At the beginning. Because if you don't have a plan of where you're heading, you're actually hamstrung in terms of that responsiveness. And so going along that plan, but modelling your vulnerability at the same time. So as you talked about before, we weren't taught it. So there's a huge amount of, teachers come in wanting to do their best. They want to make a difference. That's why we signed up for the role. It's the best job in the world. That's what it's all about. But if we don't know the new science or the right, those sorts of things, there's a lot of guilt that comes. So that knowing what your why is and why you're going through the change to feed you and fuel you during that time was huge. And also for us, we use learning zones. So having a model in that change management side of recognizing we're in the comfort zone. We have to go through the fear zone and stretch into that play and then into learning and growth zone, and that's not comfortable. And sometimes it looks comfortable to us as leaders. So that real importance of saying, this part might be my weak area too, and that's okay. And like Chris said, then how do you respond to those that need first go, second go, third go, where you will have early adopters that just, this is great, I'm ready to put these in. So we use an analogy of going on the road trip, and you're unpacking the car to pack the car at the same time as you're going, what's fit for purpose?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of new discoveries as we went along around, and questions for those who suddenly got to assessment and went, well, hang on a minute, that's no longer fit for purpose. When you've still got some people who are adjusting to, what do you mean I have to change the way I'm teaching? What really is explicit and direct? So we found having something like a Padlet or a digital platform where we could revisit what had been taught. So you could go away and upskill in your own time, as well as leadership availability. And I can't say that enough. And that's where that resourcing into having collaborative planning sessions, team meetings, and for myself, being on the ground, being in class, teaching and modelling alongside teachers.
Brilliant. And I think Listening to you, Deb, what was springing to mind for me was there will always be people in a schooling space who go off and are further ahead in terms of their knowledge acquisition. And I think from a leadership perspective, what I've experienced is that it's really important for us as leaders to be mindful of taking the masses with us. Yes, you talked about being aware of how we can support people in different ways and the opportunity for repetition. I don't know that we always consciously think about how we're taking everybody with us, and that just that one or two people flying ahead is great.
Yeah.
Is a really good start, but bottom line, we're talking about building a consistent evidence-based educational pathway. So that means the whole team.
That's right.
Everybody. What are the fundamentals that everybody needs to know about this stuff? And it's kind of, you want to kind of compartmentalize that and then have these like extra for experts, and they can go off and do that. Yeah.
And that wave of, it won't happen overnight, but actually we are on an urgency timeline.
Yeah,
So
totally.
there was always, yes, this is the play part. Now this is real. And this is, so it's that, yeah, there's a whole strategy in behind that, but it's knowing your people and relationships so they're comfortable to reach out for support, and they're happy to invite you 3 times into your room type element to work alongside. Or my other favorite that we did, we ran a literacy quiz. We used 5 from 5, and I redid that, and we've used it every year since, to actually pop some of that. I think I know it. Oh, actually, no, this is why again. We're building real teacher knowledge, and it gave us the giggles. And then we heard it. We could have people talking about, oh, I was doing this the other night, and they could hear it in their own personal life. That was hilarious. So yeah.
What about for you, Abby? What key things have you done to sort of work towards taking everybody with you from a knowledge perspective, building knowledge?
Yeah, last year created a doc that we all use. We use our time a lot wisely, like at syndicate meetings and teacher meetings, we're always trying to build knowledge. So we created this doc, and it came from the roadmap. So what area we're going to look at, and we referred obviously back to the platform, use the resources there because what's on there is amazing.
Yes.
And gave teachers a clear idea of what video we're going to be looking at or what reading is going to be done before a syndicate meeting. And then we had, so the doc was used for the teachers to put their key takeaways from that. From
Brilliant.
Which was great. So then they would sit down together, and just the chat that was happening around building that knowledge was fantastic. But I just think it's so important just to keep going back and reviewing. There's so much to learn. And yeah, just going back even with our observations and coaching our team, always coming back to spelling. And, even though we might be looking at authentic text at the moment, going back into those spelling lessons. Ensure that it's in that tier 1, and
I think a couple of things have really sprung to mind through the things that you've all shared, and what's been a real trend is the reviewing of knowledge over and over, and the importance of that. And then you've sort of shared some different mechanisms for how you might go about that. I think a key thing to pick up on what you were just saying, Abby, is the gift of time, or the allocation of time. And I'm sure that Chris and Deb, you do this too, where you're actually strategic and planned how team meetings or syndicate meetings will work. And that actually is about building knowledge. It's not that, teachers are expected to spend hours and hours and hours of their own time. Yes, there will be a little bit of that, but actually fundamentally we can't rely on that. And I guess, will we get the same buy-in, but actually will we get the same kōrero happening around the components of knowledge, and that really good, robust dialogue, if we don't allow for that to happen when we're kind of, together, and we can't, otherwise we can't collaborate and lean into the good chats about that new knowledge. The other thing that I'm kind of pondering is, we talk a lot about knowledge, but in my experience, your knowledge is only as good as your practice. If you can't practice what's in your head, then, is it really that useful? So I really want to lean into now having some chat around practice and what is it that you are doing in your various settings to develop practice to kind of, I guess for me, the practice is about, do they understand the knowledge? Because once you start to understand the knowledge and you can transfer it into your practice, kids are starting to win through this process, right? And teachers are winning. So what is it that you're doing in your various kura to help really develop great practice, to maintain great practice, and to keep building on that practice? What are some of the things that you've got going on? Let's go back to you, Chris.
I think the coaching has been really vital in terms of that. So like we're going back to that at the moment. And like you've talked about revisiting and refreshing and reminding ourselves of our journey and going over some things we've covered before. But I think it's the modelling, the coaching, and also video reflection as well, like getting staff to video and a lot of the times, even through the coaching today, it's people are identifying where their next steps are. So I think that's something we're going to continue on with. We're coaching our coaches to be able to continue that process. I think that's probably the main thing.
Deb?
Similar in that the importance, coaching, mentoring has been gold for us. And I've run a number of sessions around what that looks like, sounds like in practice, how to actually reflect, what really reflecting is, and using scales in terms of, if I'm at this point, what's one more thing that I can do to get closer to the end goal? But also in terms of this for us is urgency. Like our children are needing the gold standard of literacy instruction to actually achieve in life. So we've tied ours straight away to our PGCs right from the get-go. And the message there is around these coaching conversations do actually have a progression. And progression in practice is really important. We spend a lot of time in team meetings. So we had that wave. Guess what I'm hearing, Abby, is very much like your roadmap, those hit points with your consultant and then rolling into the follow-up and the closeness of that. What does it look like? And then into collaborative planning sessions and those sorts of things. And we had a bit of fun. So we might start a team meeting with going through encode, decode, mark, have a giggle if we've missed, read it like a shopping list, those sorts of things, but hammering that common practice model so it becomes innate, but equally the clear message is your brain can't hold all of that science in its hand, it needs a plan. So
100%. Yeah, and isn't it interesting? I'm sure, it's really exciting to hear all the coaching that's going on. And this is a space that I have a particular and particularly passionate about. And last week myself, I was in a school and had observed 14 spelling lessons, and then I was going into all the coaching conversations, but it was a coach the coach process. So I was coaching the coaches as I was doing the coaching. And it's incredible how we observe trends, like often that decode, encode, decode process is not down pat through different parts of the spelling lesson. So we can totally guarantee it will be like that in the reading, and we can probably guarantee that there won't be clear support of transference into writing through scaffolding kids into the encoding process and writing. So what I've really picked up from what you've just said, Deb, is the importance of building the in-school capability and capacity of coaching for maintaining this teaching approach going forward. Do you find that your content knowledge and practice is growing as you're working through that coaching process too?
It's amazing. Because it strengthens, and that's, I guess, because you are a learner as much as your team is 100%. A learner, and we are. That's one thing that I think we do well. We're quite open in that space. And our team are amazing. So the shift in the last 3 years, and it's really commentable. Our consultant talks about it, and our external PLD people who come in to do, let's be honest, PLD is cramped at the moment, right?
Yeah.
So we have lots of other compliments because of this journey, how open our staff are to the video now. That's part and part of who we do. And Chris, I totally agree. Without it, that self-reflection wouldn't have got to the depth that it's at now. But but that core practice as to why do I do decode, then encode, then decode? Why is that pattern so important that it hits the knowledge behind it? Yeah, that's been huge. And then what we've also noticed is our curriculum team may have all sort of flown to other places now, and the importance of that strategy around. So this year we're investing in our team leads heavily. They're an amazing group of developing leaders, and they have fantastic relationships with their team. And so that know your team, know your people has been huge.
And filtering it down, which is just, or through as opposed to down, whatever the language is.
Yeah. Across.
Across, that's a good word. Abby, what about for you guys at St. Patrick's in terms of maintaining and further developing that practice?
Very much the same. And also like using those checklists on the platform, they're so just to, we're at the stage where we have been sticking to the script and now we're starting to add a bit of responsiveness into there, which is fantastic. Cut the fluff, teach the staff. And also giving our staff the resources so that they can implement it in their classroom and consistently through the school, ensure that everyone's got a sound pack, ensure that even our gestures, like our spelling fingers and syllable, tapping our chests and I say, you say, ensuring that's consistent and having those things in the classroom just helps with the teacher's confidence as well.
Yes. I think that one of the other things too around building the consistency of hand gestures and any of those non-verbal cues that we use as teachers really sit alongside what we're trying to achieve from our learnings in the science of learning, and knowing the importance of not overcomplicating or not putting our students into cognitive overload. So sometimes I experience there's a real misconception with the implementation of particularly the spelling component of structured literacy, where people get all hung up on, are we not putting kids into cognitive overload? But actually my experience has been moving from class to class where I don't even know the kids, but because of the way that you instruct, you minimize the cognitive load so that you can really hone in on the quality content that you're trying to teach. Are you seeing that as you develop and support the development of practice in your various kura, that are you seeing this kind of confidence come from teachers around the quality of their teaching instruction? And by that I mean the inclusion of those non-verbal cues.
Absolutely. And time management, what used to take 40 minutes to teach a spelling lesson is now 20 minutes, which is
brilliant
in itself. And that just shows that it's, that constant feedback, that constant review is working, which is great.
Last week I was having a conversation just around that time, and I said to a couple of teachers, or what might have actually ended up being the whole staff, I said, you know what, going forward, I just want you to put the timer on, and when it gets to 20 minutes, you're out. You are not allowed to continue with that lesson. And they all sort of gasped. And I said, well, you're competitive. That's going to make you get yourself sorted and go with a little bit more perkier pace. So I'm going to be interested to see when I visit again in a few weeks how that cutting of that time is sort of influencing the pace in their practice. One thing that we cannot control in our schools is changing personnel all the time, right? So what are we doing in the space of ensuring that while we're maintaining and sustaining this practice, how do we go about inducting those new people as they come into school? Let's start with you, Abby. What are some of the things that you've got going on to upskill people as they come in new to St. Patrick's?
So last year, Kelly and I created a induction document, just so when we do, and we have had changes this year, so it's perfect timing. So we take our new teachers through the induction program, and there's stuff in there like who to see for a certain area. Also built or listen to Solder Story, little recommendations for the new teacher to our school. Also, yeah, we approach it very much like the other staff. So we get in there and we model those first, 4 lessons, starting at spelling, like reducing that cognitive load of for the teacher, and ensure, like, let's focus on spelling, then we'll get into reading. Modeling it, and then just gradually releasing and give them the chance to have a go and back into model with need or observe, and then buddy observations and self-review videos as well. Yeah,
Brilliant. I'm quite keen to be a new teacher in your school. It sounds really supportive, like actually that's a real trend that I'm picking up from the 3 of you. Everything that you're speaking, it sounds supportive. It sounds like it's coming from a place of care, but it also sounds like it's coming from a really strong sense of moral purpose in terms of the urgency of us moving into this. And when you were chatting, all of you, about the coaching piece earlier, I was sitting here and I'm thinking, and I bet this happens in a manner enhancing way, whereas, many of us that have been in this profession for some time could all tell a horror story about someone who's come into our classrooms and just ripped us to shreds for whatever reason around what we were teaching or what was going on. So I just kind of want to add that in terms of the coaching structure, is that it's really important that we put the people, our teachers, in the center of this, just like we do for our students when we're talking learning, and we have these conversations in a manner enhancing and caring way. What would you recommend to schools going forward? If we've got schools clearly in a whole lot of different places across the country, and we are potentially, over the course of the next few months, maybe we're going to get some really clear direction around what literacy instruction must look like going forward. And whatever way, shape or form that comes, what would be 1 or 2 key things that you would recommend that school leaders consider as they work to build a consistent evidence-based educational pathway? Deb, let's come to you first.
For us, moral purpose is everything. So knowing our why, for us, we are equity and excellence driven. So for us, it's around, now that we know the science, we won't let go of the science. And so we don't dabble, we're in boots and all. There's no half heart in our world. And that's, I think, a wrestle that people coming towards such a fundamental shift wrestle with. And that, there are different pathways in. For us, our learners needed equity and excellence right from the get-go. So that common practice model, making that clear, and equally for our inductees, going back to what Abby was sharing, it has to be everybody. So we're invested right from the get-go. If you're choosing to join our waka, that means you're choosing to leave that other practice at the door and you're jumping into our car. So we go back to our roadmap model. We use our Teacher Only Day to share that story, and whatever change comes, it comes into our school curriculum. So we've rewritten our school curriculum at every point as we've gone along. It's a living document. So part of my term-by-term action plan, or roadmap as Abby refers to it, is going, all right, what do I now need to document in a way that people can read and pick up and hold on to? That is the way that we do it here, so that our culture is sustainable around our beliefs in literacy practice, and it's easy to go back and go, but this is why, remember, and this is why it looks that way. So and that's right through to goal setting. So we've just done student goals all around literacy. So
Deb, you used the term boots and all. So in our team at Learning Matters, we talk a lot about personas, and boots and all is actually one of our characters. Another of our characters is a macadamia nut, because a macadamia nut, in fact, is the hardest of all nuts to crack. And you will have, or people will have in their schools, macadamia nuts. And I just want to take a moment to... You've talked a lot through this chit chat about knowing people, about, you haven't used these terms, but you've talked about relationships, about knowing the personas of people. in your experience, how do we as school leaders work to, dare I say, cracking that macadamia nut and helping them to become a boots and all persona?
For those that are joining the Waka, that's easy. You're coming here and we're excited because we are getting a shift in our applicants that are choosing us now because they want to upskill in this area. And that for us is a real win in terms of who we are and what we stand for. In terms of, let's be honest, it's the hard on the bus, off the bus. There is a shift that happens around what is the vision for the school, and it's the clarity. For us, we're lucky, and I keep going back to board and SLT being united. You can't move forward and cracking your nuts.
That's going to be great in the quote.
Isn't it just? Without actually everybody being on the same page. And it takes a whole team to shift that, because it's not just one person, and we all have stuff up moments in our leadership. I have no doubt that I have impacted positively and also historically horrendously, because I'm a human, and as humans we have to learn better. So our team has a lot of high trust in that space, that it's not just one person, it's also your colleague next door influencing. It's okay, have a go at that. But also it's SLT together saying, but it's also part of our PGC, and we will do this. So it's a bit of both, but we celebrate together.
Yeah, and I very much pick up that strong sense of shared ownership, that, the buck doesn't stop with one person, that you're really working hard to build that shared responsibility, that shared ownership with the various levels of leadership, but just right across the board. What about for you, Chris? What would be something that you would recommend for people to be considering?
Yeah, I think creating a PLD team from people across the school to really help support teachers, and having that PLD plan and direction of where you're all going, and timeframes. But also I think it's about responding to teachers. Like, you need to give them time to build that knowledge, and checking in regularly and adjusting accordingly. And I think from our point of view, it's taking time with implementation, like going step by step, and not rushing that change to make sure we did it as well as we could, and make it a core focus. And that's probably the key things for us.
Brilliant, thank you. Abby?
Very much what's been said, really. Definitely build that knowledge. Start with the why. Like, you have to have that knowledge before you get going. Invest in your leads as well. Like, I've been very lucky that with the supportive board and management team, I've done MSL training, I've done limit training, I've been able to go to the ideal reading workshops, and with Kelly as well. And just for me to confidently help, and lead change within our school just makes such a difference. And it's an amazing journey. I think it's really important to not see structured literacy as a program, and as an approach to learning, and if you do it, if you take your time, do it the right way and do it well, then it's an approach to learning.
Brilliant. Wow, there's so many key takeaways I've been jotting down fiercely in my little notebook as you leaders have been speaking. And I'm just going to kind of close off our chit chat this afternoon with a couple of real nuggets of gold that you've shared from your on-the-ground experience. So the very first one is how you've all really planned for and led into and through the change. I very much get the notion from all of you that this isn't done yet. And I think that you will always be kind of cycling back around to check in and see where you're at with your implementation. The other things that have really stood out have been further to that, how considered you continue to be. So you're not just talking this, I know that you all could evidence documents of systems and process, such as action plans or roadmaps, that are actual living documents and working documents that you're using to not only strategically map your journey out, but I'm 100% confident that they will also be used from an accountability measure as well to see what have we done, what's worked well, where do we need to go from here. So you're kind of always in that reflective leadership space. There's been a really big trend in this afternoon's chat about taking people with you. And one of the things that's really come through strongly is a little bit of this, and I don't have a fancier term for this, so let's just go with it. No shit surely approach. So what I mean by that is, but it's really balanced nicely by caring about the people and taking the people with you as you build up your coaching process. So from all three of you, I've got this real notion of this is who we are and this is how we do it here, but we will support you. We will support you 100% of the way. We will guide you. We will provide you with the resources that you need to do this, and we will help you do this, but we are doing it. So I really kind of want to celebrate that, because I think that's you've got that underlying notion of belief of everybody going together and building consistency. You all talked about the coaching models that you've got in place. Abby, you mentioned the checklists on the platform. We talked about the importance of understanding that coaching is going to build our content knowledge. One of the things I love the most about the space that I work in is that actually through teaching, I learn so much. So by the time I've presented the limit training so many times, my knowledge is, exponentially greater, because we all learn through teaching, right? You have to learn it to deliver it, you reflect, and then you go again. So when you're coaching someone else, you learn so much through that process. And I share that piece because often leaders will say things like, oh, well, but how will I ever have all that content knowledge? Trust the process. You will develop that content knowledge over the time. And the more you are open to having these coaching conversations and getting in and out of seeing people in practice and watching videos of practice, you will develop that coaching practice. So many amazing takeaways. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It has been an absolute privilege. Sadly, we didn't get to go live. We had to do this as a recording, which I know you were all secretly really super happy about. But I do just want to thank you. And I hope that everybody who is tuning into this recording has really, really enjoyed listening to these three fantastic leaders. So a couple of reminders from me before we clock off. I want to remind everyone about our Save the Date for the Cultivating Literacy Landscape Symposia that's coming up this year in Wellington and Auckland on the 20th and 22nd of August. I so wish I could tell you who is coming, because it's just going to be so exciting, but I can't quite do that just at this point in time. And my next Chit Chat is going to be with Dr. Katie Pace-Miles, who is based out of New York University, and her and I are going to chat about sight words, irregular words, heart words, and everything that comes out of the research and the mix for all of those. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. And to Chris, Deb, and Abby, thank you so much for your knowledge and your passion in this area.
Thanks, Carla.